Zealand's big banks regularly come under fire for the big salaries, big bonuses and big profits. In the past year, the Big Four made $3.2 billion, which works out to about $720 profit for every person in New Zealand. And what angers some is that profit goes offshore because those banks are all Australian owned. But the New Zealand Bankers Association says its research shows those profits are actually about average. Its Chief Executive Kirk joins us now from Wellington. Good morning to you, Kirk. Tell us, why did you decide to commission research on banks' profits?
Morning, Dean. Well, we thought it was important to have some context around the profit numbers, because generally what gets reported is a raw number, and it looks big because, particularly for the Australian-owned banks, the balance sheets are pretty big. But what the return on equity data showed across 7 banks, the 7 locally incorporated banks in New Zealand, is that the return on equity is pretty much average for companies, i.e. companies that are listed on the New Zealand Stock Exchange in the top 50. So the New Zealand banks fell in a range between 16.5% and 7.5% on average over 5 years. The top of the range on average over 5 years for other companies was, I think, restaurant brands at 30% return on equity. So the banks fell firmly, even the big Aussie-owned banks fell firmly in the middle of the pack.
So what you're trying to tell us is that we're wrong when we say the big banks' profits are excessive.
No, I think what we were trying to provide is some context and some relevant data which shows, other than just a big number, how are these companies performing in the context of other companies in New Zealand. And I think the piece of research that we commissioned from Massey demonstrates that. And it's I think it's probably not the end of the story. I think we could usefully get some other research from Massey on a range of things. What are the comparisons across other banks and other parts and other economies? How does the banking industry compare with other industries in New Zealand? So, we'll be looking to commission that research and release it next year. Because
you're not really comparing like with like, are you, when you're talking about banks compared to any other listed company?
Well, that's a very fair point. What we wanted is a sort of a baseline, and because the banks aren't listed in New Zealand, it's difficult to get that baseline. But as I said, one of the ways that we dealt with that issue is commissioning independent research. So the researchers can account for that as much as they can in that way.
But even so, there are some distortions, aren't there? If we look at this particular 5-year period that you're talking to, 2008 to 2012, that was during a downturn where they were having to provision more for potential losses because of the housing downturn, and also where they had to pay a whole lot of money, billions of dollars, back to the taxman. So does this really tell us an accurate picture of how well the banks did?
Well, I think on your first point, all companies were probably experiencing the same or similar types of effects from the global financial crisis and the recession in New Zealand. So,
but surely the banks most acutely. It was a banking crisis.
Well, I suggest what the banks are reflective of the economy. So, essentially, they weren't any more impacted than other New Zealand businesses, and I think that's what the research shows over that 5-year period. The other point that you make about the provisioning for tax payments, I'd have to check that, but I suspect that the provisioning was done prior to 2008 because of the settlement process.
All right then, but we also have the issue of New Zealand banks' profits relative to their Australian parents, and some analysis done by interest.co.nz suggests that the New Zealand banks do better. Should we not feel aggrieved that they're making more money out of us as a percentage than they do out of the Australians?
Well, I'm not sure I haven't seen the interest research, but as I said, what we wanted to do is commission some independent, robust research that put the banks in the context of other listed companies in New Zealand.
Thank you very much, Kirk. That is Kirk from the New Zealand Bankers Association.